Nice to see such a lovely crowd. We've had really great events recently, and we have a few more this month and a couple more in November, so please pick up one of our yellow calendars on your way out and visit our website, foodforthoughtbooks.com, to find out what else is coming up. Before I introduce Pierre, I just want to say how lucky I am to be at Food for Thought Books. Many of you already know it's a workers' collective, and so that means we own a place, we work here, we make all the decisions. But one other reason why I'm so lucky to be here is because I get to meet people like Pierre. People come through and we see them buying books, we see them doing their thing in town, and then all of a sudden they come and they say, "Oh, I wrote this book. Will you maybe have me here to speak?" And it's like really impressive, and just really, I get to meet such exceptional people, one of whom is Pierre, who's here tonight with us, and I just wanted to express my gratitude to all of you great people, because lately it's just felt we've had several local authors, local scholars this season, and I just feel so lucky to be among you. So tonight we have Pierre Aurelius, who has written his first book, Education Under Occupation, The Heavy Price of Living in a Neo-Colonized and Globalized World. With a title like that, you can prepare yourselves for some really, intense and provocative words from Pierre this evening. And I recognize many of you as educators and as educators of educators in this area, and I'm sure that you will take away much needed knowledge tonight from Pierre. Pierre was born and grew up in Haiti. Although he is the youngest child in his family, he was the first one to finish high school and attend college. While Pierre was in high school, he took part in numerous student movement protests that led to the overthrow of notorious principal and assistant principal of the public high school he attended. As a college student in Haiti, Pierre continued to be politically active. In 1997, Pierre finished his bachelor's in human services advocacy from UMass Boston, and in 2001, Pierre earned a master's degree in applied linguistics with a focus on English as a second language from the same university. A former high school teacher in the Boston Public Schools and currently a doctoral candidate in education at UMass Amherst, Pierre has been carrying out for the last 4 years qualitative and quantitative research in Western Mass that involve urban middle school teachers. In addition, Pierre has taught writing and grammar courses to college students at various institutions in Boston and Western Mass. His research interests include colonial and neocolonial studies, critical literacy, critical pedagogy, pedagogy for self-liberation, and the liberation of others. And Pierre has spoken nationally and internationally on all of these things. And he's just told me that he's been invited to speak at Mount Holyoke College next week on Tuesday. What time? 7:30 next Tuesday. So spread the word to all your colleagues and friends who couldn't make it tonight. So thanks again for being here, and please help me welcome Pierre Aurelius.
Thank you, Erica, for such a wonderful introduction. And also thank you for working so hard to make this possible. And I know you didn't do it alone. You had help from your colleagues, such as John, Matthew, who also worked hard to make this event a reality. And thank you everyone for being here on such a beautiful evening. I know there are other important things that you could have done, but instead you choose to be here. So thank you so much. Before I start sharing some parts of the book, which is the point of my being here tonight, I would like to take 5 minutes, if I may, to tell you some stories. Some of us from the Caribbean, we like to tell stories because we believe through stories we come to voice. In fact, for those who've been marginalized, who've been deprived the basic and writing skills, we use old stories to tell our stories. So, like someone like my mom. So I'm gonna begin by telling you how this book came into being. I'm mostly interested in the process, not so much in the product. So when someone saw this book, they were like, "Wow, Pierre, you wrote the book." And so I'm not gonna use the microphone. I'm loud enough for you to hear what I'm saying. So someone said, "Wow, you wrote a book," but they don't know how I got there. So it's important for me to tell you how I got there. As many of you know, if not all of you, writing is a very lonely endeavor because you spend hours working sometimes in cold basement, like I did, sometimes in warm, comfortable places. When you're writing under the circumstances, sometimes you feel like giving up, But there are things inside of you that keep telling you cannot give up because you're not using your voice only to make a point to serve your own interest. You're using your voice to talk about issues that some people couldn't talk about because they've been marginalized. People who've been put in jail unjustly. People who are living under occupation. People don't know if they're gonna wake up the next day alive because they have to move from one region to another in order to avoid bombs from dropping over their head. And people who've been deprived of basic writing skills. So I believe everybody is an author. But sometimes for extreme educational, political, and economic reasons, they don't have the skills to put those words. Therefore, someone like me, I feel like it's a moral and political obligation to write this book, not only for myself, but for my mom, who couldn't write it because she was deprived the basic writing skills. So, before I was able to write this book, there were things that preceded it. In other words, the book is not only the product of Pierre. There are people who participated in the process. So I would like to begin by acknowledging and thanking those who have helped me throughout the process. So I would first and foremost begin by thanking my mother, who sacrificed all her life, who sacrificed her education so that I could have one. My mom did not know how to read to me bedtime stories because she was too busy trying to, to make ends, meet. But she taught me three things. Those things are respect yourself and others, take pride in yourself, and try to put your human dignity above anything else. So she's really my true role model and hero. I said hero, I don't say hero, because I believe he was a very sexist word. And there are people who actually inspired me to be here. Those are professors, colleagues, even those who try to put me down. So I would like to begin by acknowledging my partner, Romina Pacheco, who was extremely supportive during the time when I was writing this book. She made me, I don't know how many times, she made me warm tea after spending hours in my cold basement trying to get those ideas and to print. She would tell me when I feel morally down, she would say, "Come on, Pierre, you can do it. I believe you. You get my trust." When my proposal was rejected, I wanted to put aside my book and focus only on my doctoral work. By the way, I'm still a student. And Sonia Nieto can testify, and my friend Andreas and my colleagues can testify, and I'm still a student. So, yeah, she was very supportive. So without her, I don't think I would have been able to write this book. And of course, there are professors, undergraduate professors who, at the early stage in my academic career, told me that, Pierre, if you want to be a good writer, you can become a good writer. So I have to thank Professor Anne Witham, who thought that I write as well as a native speaker, but I think she was just being polite. And I have to thank Pepe Lessina, who's been, a mentor to me since 2001, actually. She's been really good to me. I had professors such as Mazarelli, my high school teacher, my history high school teacher, Jean-Pierre, Paul Asensio was like a mentor to me. I met professors like, Macedo, Donaldo Macedo, who inspired me, who told me, you cannot be average, Pierre, you are too smart, you cannot be average, you got to go far. And of course, there are friends who've been there for me for years, I don't know how many years. Friends like Jean, Rima, Blaise, who's sitting there, might be the tallest guy in the crowd. He actually was the first person who read the first few chapters of the book and gave me some feedback. Sometimes I would disagree or, with him, but nevertheless, he's been there for me. My friend, Lumba Shabaka, who's not here tonight because he's somewhere in Michigan trying to finish his doctorate. My friend Fresnel, I don't know if he's here. He was supposed to be here. I drove from Boston, but hopefully he'll be here sometime tonight. Noel Stephen, who knows me for years. And friends that I met here. Not only class, but friends. Friends such as Margaret Boycott, who read most of the manuscript, if not all, and told me, Pierre, I hope we can get this published. This is so moving. And Andres Ramirez, who was the first person who invited me at Rayers to have a coffee so that he could give some feedback on the first 2 chapters. So thank you, Andres. Thank you, Margaret. And Drew Hafner, who always made me laugh, who read the proposal and gave me some feedback. My mama, Gloria. Thank you so much, Gloria. You've been so good to me. Kathy was not here tonight. And of course, Jane, Simon, Harold, and his wife. The list goes on and on. And I cannot forget that. Rachel Briggs, who wrote the entire manuscript and gave me some feedback. Those are people that I met here. They are students just like I am. And also, Professor Sonia Nieto. I don't know if she's here. Oh, she's there. Yeah. Sonia Nieto, not only has she been a mentor to me, but she's been like a mom to me. She would give me advice. She's the reason why I'm here. She read, she didn't write it, I wrote it. She read most of the manuscripts, she gave me feedback, and she felt that she could support it. So she's one of the person who endorsed it. So Nyanyot is one of my intellectual heroes. And I have to thank Noam Chomsky, who was very supportive of me. I went to meet him, read some of the chapters of the book, gave him some feedback, and he said, what are you going to do with them? I said, well, I'm going to expand on them. I said, well, he encouraged me to expand on the first few chapters. Then chapter by chapter, then after the first chapter, the second chapter, third chapter, fourth chapter, then it became a book. So I have to thank Noam Chomsky. He's one of the kindest men I ever met in my life. And I also have to thank Cesar Rosato, whom I met about a year ago in Lasso. Although he didn't really know me well, but he took the chance to get to know me, to talk to me. He's like a mentor to me now. In fact, I'm going to present with him at AERI sometime next year. And of course, I have to thank Gadi Gito, who I keep saying writing, who read the proposal and gave me some feedback. Frank Johnson and gosh, I hope I'm not leaving anybody out. And lastly, but not least, my brother Lionel, who's been like a dad to me. His wife been really supportive to me, and his children, who are my children. And of course, my sister, who's not here, but without those people, I don't think I would have been able to do this. So when you see this book, don't think only about Pierre, but also think about those people who have supported me to make it real. You can see it now. So, having said that, I would like to clarify a few things before I start some parts of the book with you. There are some terms that I use throughout the book. Those terms might be news to some folks. Terms such as rest and the rest. So in opposition to the word the rest, I use the word the rest. I am not the first person who used that term. I think Radhakrishnan used it in his book. But I use it in different contexts, as you will see if you get to read the book. And I use the word phrase such as Western countries because I wanted to use it in opposition to Western countries. So when I said Western countries, I'm not referring to the US, Canada, or France. I'm referring to countries such as Haiti, India, countries that were colonized, neo-colonized, and even occupied, such as Iraq. Countries in the Middle East, in Africa, in South Central America, in the Caribbean, and some part of Eastern Europe, and of course, India. So that's what I mean when I say the Western countries, which you're going to be hearing a lot throughout my presentation. And also, in the first chapter of the book, I use some parts of my personal life. It's not my biography, because I think I'm too young to write a biography. But I think it's important for the reader to have a sense of the writer in terms of where he or she comes from. And I believe what we call personal can also be political, if you want it to be. So I use some pieces of my life in the first chapter because I wanted the reader to see the voice, to feel the voice through the words, okay? So, but keep in mind, it's not my biography. And finally, I would like to say that in writing this book, I had no idea where it would take me. But my dear hope is that throughout the book, my voice will join voices that have been fighting for economic, social, cultural, political, and sexual justice. In short, for a better society, which all of us deserve to live in. So, I will begin by reading some part of the first chapter. In doing so, I will use one of the poems that I wrote as a preamble to the first chapter. In the poem, I like telling stories, so be with me. In the poem, I raise some issues that do not get to discuss in classrooms, nor do they get to discuss in mainstream media that we corporate media. Some people might not find themselves through the poem because their life experience has been different, but I sincerely hope that the content of the poem will push them, will challenge them to critically reflect on their unearned privileges and corporate interests. Because it's my conviction that through critical reflection, people can develop critical consciousness, which in turn might empower them to take action against social injustice that people both in the Western and the Western world have been a victim. So, having said that, I'm going to begin with the poem which I entitled Imagine a Country. Imagine a country where the school system is still operating among the debris of colonialism, where millions of people do not have access to clean, safe water, where children die of diarrhea caused by this water and other curable diseases, where the majority of people do not have health care, and where the environment is constantly under attack. Imagine a country where women are overworked and underpaid in foreign-owned factories, where they produce brand clothes and shoes like Nike for less than 50 cents per hour, and yet do not earn enough money to feed themselves and their families. Imagine a country where the wealthy, or those with some kind of economic capital, treat domestic workers, maids, as more than house slaves, where politicians and other so-called leaders and armed teenage boys and girls and use them to murder their opponents as a way to stay in power. Imagine a country where human rights are a meaningless concept for those in power and those who are simply armed, where speaking out against torture and government corruption is taken as a threat and can cost one's life. Imagine a country from which you hold your most cherished memories, where your friends and family live, but which you hope to live soon because of poverty, violence, and abuse of human rights. Finally, imagine a country where you are fearful and feeling unsafe because your political stance and ideology
are taken as too subversive, where challenging the status quo equates to being a traitor and unpatriotic. Like many people in the Western world, I don't have to imagine those ugly scenes I just described in the poem. Because being born and raised in a country that was colonized and occupied for decades, I personally experienced and witnessed some of these scenes. Given my social class background, I was not expected to go to and finish high school, let alone go to college and attend graduate school. Out of hundreds of people with whom I grew up, I was one of the few who made it through high school, to which millions of poor Caribbean children do not have access. In fact, in some rural areas, including the one where I spent part of my childhood, attending enough school to learn the basic reading and writing skills remains a dream for thousands of Caribbean poor children. Some of these children had to work long hours on farms owned by power brokers who stole lands from the peasants, from the farmers, who could not afford to send their children to the local school, let alone to clothe them. Though I'm the youngest in my family, as Erica mentioned earlier, I was the first person who graduated from high school and go to college. My older sisters were supposed to graduate high school before me, but they did not make it beyond 8th grade. My father did not support the idea of investing in my sister's education, fearing that they would get pregnant before graduating high school. In fact, my father was not alone in being reluctant to invest in his daughter's education. Many Caribbean fathers believe that girls should get some basic education and then stay home to help the mother clean, cook, and take care of their younger brothers and sisters. Although this might not reflect the reality of middle and upper class Caribbean women, it remains a fact that sexism affects most, if not all, women in the Caribbean. So if you disagree with me, we can have a conversation about it. Errol and Errol's wife. My high school and college years within the neo-colonial school system were shadowed by political turmoil that paralyzed the whole country. However, until I became politically aware of this, I lived an innocent, naive, and laissez-faire lifestyle in my native land, Haiti. I did not realize to what extent this country was devastated economically and politically by internal division that resulted from bloody fights among so-called leaders and fight for power. Nor did I realize to what extent it was also economically, politically, and culturally destroyed by imperialist manipulation coming from Western countries such as the US, Canada, and France. The reason I was able to live such an innocent and naive life was that I did not have the political awareness and consciousness to question what I was taught to be natural and canonical truth, until I started to question the disorder of things. I was regarded and treated as a good boy, that is, obedient, smart, and polite. However, when I began asking pertinent, threatening questions about the Haitian school system that was colonial-based then, and most likely still is, my high school teachers, some of my classmates, and others labeled me as an atheist, a rebel, and a confused boy, even an angry man. But how can I not be angry when my country was colonized by France for over 100 years and occupied by the United States for almost 20 years? I think I'm a black man, as a black man who's been marginalized in my own native land and who continue to be marginalized in this country, I have a right to be angry. Now the challenge, how do I use my anger constructively? Well, I found writing as a way to release my anger instead of killing people. In school, my classmates and I were not expected to ask so many independent-minded questions that would oblige our teachers to tell us the truth or challenge them to help us answer the following questions. First question, why do students living in formerly colonized countries have to use textbooks and colonial masterpieces, the so-called colonial masterpieces, whose content is culturally and historically alienating to them? Why are French and English the primary languages of instruction in school, rather than the local dialect or Creole, the language that I know best as a working class man? Why are professors who speak French and standard English in class are considered smart, sharp, and stylish, whereas those who dare use Creole or the local dialect as the language of instruction are considered less intelligent by students, colleagues, and by the administrator of the school? Why do Western imperialist neocolonizing countries always feel they can intervene in times of political crisis to control and occupy Western countries? Why do farmers feel it's pointless to grow rice, corn, and beans because of an overflow of these products and the native land imported from the West? Spending about 2 years in college in my native land did not enable me to develop a critical mind so I could answer the question that I just posed. My colonial-based school experience did not enable me either to understand the Western cultural, political, and economic dominations of Western countries. I had to dig into the work of scholars such as Franz Fanon, Antonio Furman, Amilcar Cabral, and Albert Memmi to make sense of and critique what I wasn't allowed to know. That is, not only to know, but to question. That is the continued negative effects of colonialism on Western countries. Furthermore, my high school and college experiences within a colonial-based school system did not teach me that growing up an uneducated, like myself, poor family should not dictate one's destiny. I'm here. Yes, I'm still here. I'm alive, I'm standing. Nor these experiences teach me that being poor should not prevent one from questioning why Western countries, I said Western countries, have been put in a political economic situation where they always have to rely on the Western world for foreign aid, or worse, from IMF and the World Bank with exorbitant interest rates. Nor did my high school diploma and my 3 semesters at the Haitian State University equip me with the necessary critical and political consciousness skills to understand why factory workers work long hours making shirts, pants, jackets, shoes, baseball, and football equipment for corporate capitalist interests, while they could not feed or clothe their children, let alone send them to school. Noam Chomsky, who is one of the most prominent intellectuals, as far as I'm concerned, has been analyzing the poor, horrible working conditions of women in the Caribbean and elsewhere. Through his analysis, he referred to Haiti, and he quote, he stated, and I quote, "Foreign-owned factories that employ workers, mostly women, at well below subsistence pay under horrendous working conditions, benefit from cheap electricity, subsidized by the general supervisor. But for the Haitian poor, the general population, there can be no subsidies for electricity, fuel, water, food. These are prohibited by IMF rules on the principal grounds that they constitute price control." What Chomsky described in his quote reflect the sad reality of neighbors and relatives in the neighborhood where I grew up. I remember my neighbors and relatives having to work 10 to 12 hours a day, and yet they frequently had to borrow money from other neighbors and family members to feed their children and pay their bills. Selling their labor first for hours in foreign-owned factories did not enable them to improve their living conditions. On the contrary, these conditions had gotten worse from weeks to weeks until they were sent home after the closure of these factories. Even though I was then a young boy, it was not too hard for me to make sense of their miserable conditions. Their tired and miserable looking face, combined with the sad stories about their job, were a vivid testimony of their inhuman working and living conditions. So these experiences have helped me realize that being born and raised in a country with a history of colonialism is one of the greatest challenges that descendants of formerly colonized countries have to face. The reason is that the shadow of colonialism is deeply imprinted on their psyche and human consciousness and follows them throughout their journey in life. In fact, the legacy of colonialism overshadows the multifaceted aspect of post-colonial subjects, ways of living and being in the world. In this sense, I think it's quite reasonable to argue that post-colonial subjects are in the best position to know how it feels to be post-colonized and cope with the aftermath of colonization, such as economic, cultural, and social dominations of their native lands. Having said this, I would argue that for many of us post-colonial subjects, colonization is not over yet because we continue to be surrounded and subject to colonial practices via many public and private institutions such as school, churches, family, workplace, and of course the mass corporate media. I would argue that colonization has merely taken a different ideological, economic, and political form as the issue of the war has changed in the last 50 years or so. Even when some of us are not able to deconstruct lies embedded in colonial masterpieces, the so-called masterpieces, about our identity, culture, and history, we still continue facing the challenge to fight for an accurate representation of ourselves through text, whether it's written, verbal, or otherwise. My argument is that the material disaster that came along with colonization is not as profound as the psychological scar wound that it has caused us as post-colonial subject. The legacy of Western colonization has been carried over in the neo-colonial and neoliberal era, and it's still pervasive. To be precise, the ongoing Western policy of cultural and historical misrepresentation of post-colonial subject might be subtle, but it continues to cause damages to our subjectivity, to our own subjectivity and sense of self. Now, referring to how the legacy of colonialism continues to affect the school system of countries that were colonized, I would argue that this is a legacy that not only affects students, but also teachers. For example, in my native land, Haiti, after 200 years of independence, the language of French colonizer is still valid over the Haitian native language, Creole. When I was in middle school and high school, from mid-1980s to early 1990s, all of the textbooks that I had to use for class were in French. Nowhere in these textbooks, either on the cover or inside, were there pictures that reflected the reality of Haiti. These textbooks were, and perhaps still are, a reflection of the cultural and historical reality of France, realities to which Haitian students like myself could not relate. As a result, a great number of Haitian students, including myself, felt linguistically and culturally homeless because there was no connection between what we read in these textbooks and our culture. In fact, as a high school student, I always felt foreign and culturally and historically alienated reading stories in these textbooks, whose cultural and historical baggage was irrelevant to my lived experience. This is well captured by Kemp, who eloquently argues, and I quote, when students see neither themselves nor their histories reflected in their education, disengagement understandably follows, and unquote. Like Kemp observed, not being able to see myself culturally and historically through school material I was required to use, I felt that I had to resist what the teachers were teaching me. Moreover, through my high school experience in Haiti, I was never encouraged by my teachers to challenge and deconstruct the hidden ideology embedded in the French textbook that I was required to use in class. On the contrary, what I witnessed in personal experience was that teachers were not only complacent about teaching French literature and history, but they also took pride in repeating like parrots to students their prefabricated knowledge about the subject. At no time did I recall my high school teachers trying to question and challenge old French values, beliefs, and ideology embedded in French textbooks that were imposed on them to use in their own classrooms. Consequently, Haitian students, myself included, spent years from elementary to middle and high school, and even college, absorbing information that had no meaning to our lives. In fact, information I acquired from these French textbooks structured, set up my mind to a great extent to accept passively and reproduce the false idea that France is Haiti's mother country and source of knowledge. After years of indoctrination, of miseducation, I became a docile reproducer of French values, beliefs, and cultural norms. For instance, until I developed critical consciousness, I used to believe that the French language and literature were better than the Haitian literature and language. As a result, through social interaction with my friends and girlfriends in high school, I always used French, the language of the colonizer, to communicate with and impress people rather than my native tongue, Creole. But what I was not aware of then, as Wayne observed, and I quote, the use of a foreign language as a medium of education makes a child foreign within his or her own culture and environment, etc. This creates a colonial alienation. What is worse, the neo-colonized subject is made to see the world in where he or she stands and it as seen and defined by or reflected in the culture of the language of imposition. This is made worse when the neo-colonized subject is exposed to images of her or his own world mirrored in the written language of her or his or colonizer, where the native language, culture, history, or people are associated with low status, slow intelligence, and barbarism, end unquote. Williams' remark speaks directly to my schooling experience in Haiti. Reflecting on that experience, I have come to understand that teachers and students who lack historical and cultural consciousness sometimes let themselves get trapped in the linguistic oppression of the colonizers, who always expect the colonized to speak the colonial language at the expense of their own. This had experience with my high school teachers and college professors. More importantly, helped me better understand that the school system of a country constitutes its ideological machine or apparatus. Therefore, if any radical social, cultural, and political changes are to occur, it must begin in the school system that has been historically used to maintain and/or challenge the status quo. It goes without saying that the school system can be a dangerous institution that reproduces the dominant ideology and/or a set of struggle where ideological political fights for a just and democratic society can take place, which will lead me to education under occupation. As a teacher, I've always been interested in exploring the relation between education and occupation. To my knowledge, not too many studies have carefully looked at how the occupation of Western countries by Western imperialist powers has impacted the educational system of these countries, meaning Western countries. Studies have scrupulously examined the socio-economic and political effects of Western occupation on Western countries, and critically reflecting on the dialectical relation between occupation and education. Many pertinent questions have crossed my mind, and I would like to begin by sharing some of these questions. The first one that crossed my mind is that, can one possibly learn when one constantly has to worry about one's safety and move from one region to another to avoid bombs being dropped on one's house and one's head? How can learning take place when these bombs destroy schools and other institutions? Can one learn when one is constantly running away from bloodshed and terror? Can learning be possible when one doesn't know if one will wake up alive the next day? Does it make any sense to talk about learning when one is facing hunger and starvation in occupied lands? In short, is it conceivable to talk about education under occupation? As a post-colonial subject who was born and raised in a country that was colonized by France for over 100 years and occupied by the United States for almost 20 years, I have always been interested in seeking answers to these questions. But before I attempt to shed some light on these questions, I don't know if I can answer them. I would like to try to, oh shit, sorry. See, I'm still a working class man. I would like to attempt to attribute a definition to occupation. In my opinion, education can be defined as the physical, military, and ideological settlements of a powerful country or a group of people in foreign land which they forcibly invade and thereafter occupy as if it's their own territory. During the early stages of occupation, the occupying forces often use the media as a means to spread lies and false hope about their violent action, because after all, occupation is a violent action against those who are being occupied, while instilling fear in the psyche of the occupied. During these stages, what helps sustain the occupiers is not so much the infrastructure of the country that they occupied, because such infrastructure is destroyed during the military occupation that leads to occupation. What helps them sustain whatever they're doing there is the media, is the school system that they use. to spread the lies. And of course, I look at the school as, like I said earlier, as an ideological machine that can be used to oppress or liberate people. The ideological machine is made of some segment in the army, agents of secret information, the church, and of course the mass media. Through such an apparatus, ideological agents such as CIA agents of the occupying imperial forces try to control the mind of the occupied through consent, through hegemony. In most cases, if not all, occupation of a foreign land is motivated by economic, political, and geo-territorial strategic interests of the powerful country that occupies it. However, these interests are often hidden, are often concealed by the occupying country, which often use excuses of all sorts to justify its violent action. Besides the harmful effect that occupation has on education, which I should talk more about later, occupation harmfully affects the environment, the culture, the subjectivity, thus the life of people living in occupied lands. By the environment, I'm not only referring to the trees that are destroyed, the animals that are being killed, but also the water, the air that are being contaminated as a result of the massive cluster bombs that are used during the occupation period. The debris of these bombs are often left abandoned on the ground and become as harmful as the bombs themselves. Consequently, innocent children who after the occupation continue to play on such ground as they have before the occupation run the gravest risk of being infected by these bombs. And sometimes they die. This is the human tragedy that's not often reported by the mass corporate media. As I mentioned earlier, it's not only the economic, social, and political system of countries that are occupied that is affected by occupation. The school system of these countries is also, damaged. To achieve such a goal, the occupying force tried to control the school system by getting rid of teachers who pose a threat to their corporate interests while hiring new teachers who serve such interests. In some occupied lands such as Haiti and Puerto Rico in the 1900s, early 1900s, the occupying force brought in teachers from the occupying land to teach students in the occupied territory their own language, their own values, Western values, obviously. They imposed those values on those who are being occupied. They did so with a clear objective in mind, that is, to indoctrinate those students. And some imperialist powers, such as the United States, often claim that they want to civilize those who are being occupied. But I wonder how occupation can lead to civilization of those who are being occupied. Because occupation is nothing else but a violent action against those who are being occupied. So I would simply conclude that as Western imperialist powers have shifted their economic and political policies from colonialism to neocolonialism, it's imperative that we, neo-colonial subjects and allies, hopefully some of you, stay ideologically and politically alert so that we can map out such a gigantic shift and resist it. Also, we have a moral and political obligation to stay politically engaged with the world and act upon it. By that I mean we ought to take part in any grassroots movement aiming to fight against Western neo-colonial, neoliberal agenda. An agenda that is intended to exploit and dehumanize farmers and factory workers both in the Russian world and the Western world. The struggle against the Western neo-colonial, neoliberal agenda is a human struggle that every concerned citizen who is fighting for social, economic, political, cultural, and sexual justice should be engaged in. In other words, this is not a struggle that only concern or should only concern marginalized people in the so-called third world. This struggle that should concern all of us. Thank you. Now, I will be happy. I can get the next slide.
I'd be happy to answer any questions that I might be able to answer. All right, my friend Vedrin, go ahead.
I think following the discussion, thank you very much. I have not read the entire book, but in your discussion, I see that you never mentioned the banking system, which is related a lot to this type of education that you discussed. I wonder how much you have developed or talk about the banking system by Paulo Freire.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you acknowledge that you did not read the entire book, because throughout the book I acknowledge Paulo Freire, and of course Sonia Nieto, who was one of my, as I said earlier, was one of my intellectual heroes. Paulo Freire was I was introduced to Paulo Freire's work in 1996 by a professor that I mentioned earlier, Anne Whitford, who felt that I had to read this book. He said, Pierre, you would love this. I know you're gonna like this book. Well, as you know, you're from Haiti. The way we are taught in Haiti is very rigid. You know, you are expected to sit down and write down whatever the teacher writes on the board. So there's no room for dialogue, like Parfait argued. There's no room for social interaction between student and teachers. So whatever the teachers feels that you need to know, that's what you get. So there is no room to challenge your teachers, even to challenge your classmates. Because I believe through challenges, you learn. Learning is a struggle. But if you have a teacher who's really rigid, who thinks that you don't know enough to ask questions, you don't know enough to challenge what they present to you, then miseducation occurs. So yes, and I believe this type of education is still happening in Haiti, unfortunately. Therefore, as teachers, we need to take a different approach about teaching. We need to create space for dialogue, for honesty. Until we do that, I guess we're going to continue being educated under a system that really that is only promotes miseducation. Yes.
You taught in the school system here, so my question is, did you see any similarities between colonialism in Haiti or in other countries and the way the kids are treated here in a lot of the communities, especially communities with people of color? I mean, what's the
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I can only speak from my own experience. I'm not from here, but I've lived here long enough to have a voice. Okay? In fact, I can claim to be an American citizen because I have a passport, but this is just superficial. Yes, I've witnessed some of that. When I was a teacher in Boston Public School, I taught in a very marginalized neighborhood where most of my students were from Africa, Jamaica, well, from the Caribbean. And I could see some of the teachers, the way they taught those kids. They did not have high expectations of them. They would, sort of belittle them. Oh, okay, that's good, that's great, but they would not even give them constructive feedback. But we need to recognize that within the United States, we have been experiencing colonization, which I would call internal colonization. Look at what happened in Katrina, And this is a form, that tells you that the U.S., in some way, in some part of the U.S., are being colonized by those who are in power. And those regions that are being colonized, education for growth, for self-liberation, is not happening. I mean, I witnessed it as a teacher. To my limited ability as a teacher, I try to reverse this. I try not to repeat the way I was taught as a high school student. So I try to engage my student in dialogue, which I believe is very important, which is key, and making sure that students get quality education. So, yes, I would say, based on my personal experience, I've seen that happening. And it's unfortunate that's still, happening now. Yes, sir.
just want to congratulate you again for job well done.
Thank
You
you.
know, giving voice to voice. As you said before, a number of people would like to express their experience, but they don't have the tools. I'm interested. I must admit, I haven't read the book as yet. I'm
Okay.
hold it against me.
Okay.
I'm interested in the extent which you explore the idea of occupation beyond the more social and physical, and a more mental occupation, which you have alluded to when you speak of colonialism.
Mhm.
But the mental occupation, it could be related to neocolonialism. So I don't know if you explored that to that almost kind of super metaphor.
I did in the chapter, but you would need to read the book. No, I'm not going to be able to give all the answers. But what I can say, there are similarities between colonization and occupation.
Yeah.
But I must say, it's not only the colonizers who oppress us. We tend to oppress ourselves.
That was the second question I was
Yeah.
going to ask.
We tend to oppress ourselves. And there's a reason for that. Because before the colonizers or the occupiers arrived to our own lands, we were living a different life. But after being colonized and occupied for decades, we tend to reproduce what the colonizers used to do to us. Even when we gain our independence, or from those that occupy us or colonize us.
Yes.
So mental occupation is something that could happen as a result of being oppressed by the occupiers, but it can also something that happen as a result of internalizing oppression. Oppression that is socially constructed. You see someone abusing somebody else, and it becomes normalized, and you think it's okay to do the same thing. So I think first and foremost, we need to get rid of mental occupation, mental colonization, in order to fight against educational, cultural, and political occupation. So this dictates and determines how we behave, how we treat others, and how we treat ourselves. But until we take care of this, I don't see how we're going to be able to take care of other aspects of us as human beings. But you need to read the book in order to get all the details.
Yeah, I saw some of it.
Given the time frame, I don't want to give all the answers. If I give all the answers, what's the point of buying the book anyway? Yes. I'm listening. Yes, my friend, go ahead.
I also have not taken the opportunity to read the book yet, and I was wondering, given the U.S.'s current occupation of Afghanistan and Iraq, in a very kind of military sense, looking ahead, what kind of ideological occupation, what kind of themes would you draw between the kind of work that you've been doing, and how do you think the ideological occupation within Iraq and Afghanistan may play out?
Well, I cannot speak about Iran. I cannot speak about Afghanistan. In fact, I've never been there. I've never been there. So it will be dishonest of my part to pretend that I know what's going on there. But I can draw on my own experience as a guy who was, born, raised in a country that was occupied and colonized, by French for over a century, and occupied by the United States for almost 20 years, from 1915 to 1934. Even though I was born years after the occupation. I'm not going to tell you when I was born, that's for sure. I don't talk about my age. That's one thing we don't do. That's one thing we don't do as Caribbean people. But I can tell you that I was a victim of the effect of U.S. occupation. In fact, I was taught in school that the occupier did great things for us. They constructed an army, they built an army that was supposed to protect us. But the army turns out to be our enemies. In fact, the army that they left behind have been really oppressive to us. They overthrew any government that try to change the course of things. So, and in school, you don't really learn the disastrous consequences that the U.S. occupation has had on us. So, as I mentioned earlier, the occupiers and the colonizers, they are very smart. They usually start indoctrinating people through schools because they know that's where they can really impact people. You know, if once they control your mind, they can make you do whatever they want to. So, again, I can't really speak about Afghanistan because I've never been there. But I can imagine, based on my own experience, I can imagine how people are living there, how they are living their lives. Okay, and as I said, occupation is not only physical, it's psychological. Okay, and once the occupier control your mind through consent, they can make you do whatever they want you to do. They can make you do things that go against your own interests while serving their interests. So I guess that's the best way I can answer your question. Maybe we can have a conversation afterwards. Let me go in front so that people can see me. Come on.
I'm wondering about language. The principal language of the people in Haiti is Creole.
Creole.
The French is.
A language that was imposed on us.
And English.
English, as like all of us, we learn foreign languages in high school. But I must say, the U.S. has been having a great influence on Haiti. When I was growing up, people took pride in memorizing French songs. Now it's English songs in English. So there's been a shift in the paradigm. So France doesn't have as much influence as the U.S. now has on Haiti. I know people in here are crazy about learning English, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with learning a different language, because by knowing a language of other people, you can have a better sense of the culture, because language and culture are intertwined. But what is wrong with it is that there is a group of people invade and occupy your land and impose their own language on you while expecting you to give up on your own language. Because they know, once they make you use their own language, they can control you. Because through language you find, you have beliefs, ideology. So I don't have any problem learning other languages. But what I have problem with is when I'm being forced to learn a language at the expense of my own. So that's what has happened in Haiti and continues to happen. So, yeah.
How important do you think that religion is in a tool of occupation? The reason I ask that question is because I don't know much about Afghanistan either, or Iraq, but I know that there are religious, a lot of the fundamentalist religions weren't attacked from the beginning. As a matter of fact, bin Laden, when he was our friend, his fundamentalism was promoted at that point. So that's why I asked this question, to deal with you can answer the question. I mean, I know that you can answer the question.
But let's go back to history. Because I think history is the most sincere teacher. So if you know history, you can make sense of what's happening now and perhaps imagine what can be happening tomorrow. So let's go back to history. Christianity was used by colonizers, by French colonizers, by Spanish colonizers, by Portuguese colonizers to brainwash people. So they use religion in school, all over the place, to indoctrinate people. And I don't know if you have read Walter Watney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. He did a very critical analysis of how religion was used to oppress people who were colonized in Africa. So yes, religion plays a part in that. In fact, in Haiti, this is my reference. We people from the middle class, especially those mulattoes, they tend to look down on voodoo, which was a religion that Bookman used to unite the slaves during colonization. Bookman, by the way, was from Jamaica. He was Jamaican. So somehow he landed to Haiti. And while he was in the farms, he found ways to unite the slaves who were from Africa. And those slaves, they spoke different dialects. Therefore, there was some kind of conflict, religious conflict, because they did not share the same beliefs and values. So he said, well, our common enemy is not our religion, it's the colonizers. So what he did, he used the religion, such as voodoo, to fight, to unite the slaves so that they could fight against colonizers. Religion can be a useful tool. It depends on how you use it. Unfortunately, religion has been used throughout history to oppress people, to oppress a certain group of people. And as I'm speaking now, people are being occupied, people are being oppressed because of their religion. And of course, they've been oppressed because of the way they look, the way they talk, the way, countries, because of the country where they come from, and so on and so forth. And in Haiti, Catholicism is is the most dominant religion in Haiti. And if you want to practice voodoo, you are looked down upon. Voodoo is for the peasant, it's for the farmers, it's for the so-called uneducated. But what they fail to realize is that the so-called uneducated are educated in their own ways. They have their own form of education. They have their own histories they can share with us. But because of their social class, because of their lower status in society, we tend to look down upon them. And because they have practiced voodoo, so we tend to associate voodoo with a low status in society. Whereas Catholicism, that was imposed on us, is valued. So religion, yes, plays a part and can play a part in either oppressing or liberating people. Depends on how it's being used.
Can you say something about our state?
About what?
Our state.
Our state. Wow. What exactly do you want me to touch upon?
Whatever you think of.
He's in South Africa.
That's a very difficult position you put me in.
Okay.
Okay, I'll begin by saying that in 1990, I'll take like two more questions after yours, and then we maybe sign some of the books that you guys.
Pay for some books.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, in 1990, I supported our seat because I felt that it was the hope for Haiti. Because